on computer, and Zoe, we'll get you back and we'll pin you. And there we go, Zoe. So carry on. Sorry about that. We had a little technical hitch there.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry about that too. And it just does make you realise that when everything in your life has been replaced by a video call, how vulnerable we all are to our internet working. And actually, it does really become something super important.
Yeah. But actually, the good news is that your microphone is not so funny now.
Oh well, you know, small mercies.
So talk to us about how what are you using different processes? Are you using different technologies internally?
Yeah, so we're using more technology than normal. So obviously, first up, all the video chat software. So we are using Zoom. This is the first time we've used Zoom as an organisation since lockdown. Skype seems to have fallen out of favour, but it still works if you need to do the job, and Google Hangouts. We've also been using Microsoft Teams a lot, which I think if you're an organisation that's using Microsoft, lots of people are using that because it works with everything else. We also use a system of software called Whereby, which is a really simple video chat software. It doesn't do anything flashy like Zoom does, but we found that makes it a little bit more reliable. So that one works quite well. I also did a quick, before this webinar, I asked everyone at Softwire what software they've been using.
Okay.
So there's some specific software tools. So Fun Retro, which sounds awesome. I definitely want to have a go on Fun Retro. So that's software to review what you're doing and actually work together and say these things are working, these things are not working. And also some poker pointing. These are our software specific pieces of software for sizing pieces of work. There's also some software called Mural that is really good for sharing. You can write things on sticky notes and move them around and work together on projects. And Miro is good as a whiteboard app. So people have been using that where you would stand with someone in front of a whiteboard and draw on it. That's a really good way to work together with other people. There's a piece of software, I haven't used this, but people have been using Monday, which is a piece of software for project management. And we at Softwire have always been using Slack. So Slack is now getting, someone ran the stats and it's getting like 3 times as many messages as it used to. So people are communicating more on like messaging systems rather than just.
Are you working the same hours? Because one of the good things about Softwire was that you could work 11 till 4. Or you had core hours where you were meant to work, and then you could work any hours you want. Have you kept that? I mean, it must be that some people are looking after their kids and might want to work at 3 o'clock in the morning because, I mean, you used to work from Australia, didn't you?
Right, that's right, overnight, yeah. Yeah, so we've definitely, for people at the moment, the biggest challenge is looking after children. So one of our senior managers, his wife works in the NHS, so he's like the primary childcare during the day, and he's had to change his hours so that he works at really quite odd times. But and again, all of this means you need more communication. So if you're not going to be where someone expects you to be or available when someone expects you to be, then you just have to communicate a bit more.
What about your clients? Who do you know of your clients that are doing things well? I mean, what are their traits, or can you give them some examples of businesses, technology teams that are managing people? There might be a bit of a difficult question, but
yeah.
Or how you're communicating with your clients. Maybe that's a better question. How you stay in touch with your clients. And, you know, I was on a webinar yesterday and someone said there are 3 things that are important. Cash, costs and customers. And you've got to focus on these 3 things in businesses at the moment.
Right.
So what are you doing with your customers?
Right. So it does, again, come back to communication. So, I mean, finding out what's important to them. So not making assumptions, not saying, well, the lockdown has affected us in this way, so that's how it's affected them. we've got a really big range of clients that have really different responses or are affected in really different ways by the lockdown. So there are some businesses that are doing better as a result of the lockdown, as we discussed before. So we have a client that runs lotteries, and that is a sector that is going up because people are spending more time at home. There are less leisure activities.
It's got a negative correlation, hasn't it? When income goes down, gambling goes up.
And that's your only outlet for gambling now, is on the internet. So that's one end, and then at the other end, one of our clients is David Lloyd Leisure Group, and all of their services were provided in person. You know, there are essentially a series of gyms that you have a membership at, and the value you get from it is going physically to their building. And the software that we had built for them to date was all around how to help people access those services, you know, book tennis courts, book places at the gym. And so they have had to totally change their whole business model and actually start looking at, well, how do we deliver services online so that people can get at least some of the value that they were getting before, whether it's via online fitness classes or being part of a community. So in order to keep people going, in the hope that obviously lockdown will ease and they can reopen.
I think you just had to identify the objectives that you wanted to achieve, and then be creative around how you get those objectives. I wanted to ask you about building new technologies versus using existing platforms, and that's not necessarily something at the moment, but generally, you know, that very famous phrase, reinventing the wheel. Do you get lots of clients that come to you and say, I want to do this, and you say, that's already there? I mean, do you have a preference for you would incorporate other bits of existing technology where you can with people?
Well, I think it's an interesting question in general, and it's particularly interesting right now. So in general, some pieces of software you would never consider building a new one. So for example, the video chat software that we're using, you wouldn't say, oh, I'm going to build my own version of the video chat software, because there's no point. My video chat requirements are the same as your video chat requirements are the same as someone else's. So we all go and use the same piece of software. But one of our large clients is the BBC, and the BBC have very specific ways of doing a lot of things that they do. So actually for them, it's not so easy to just take a piece of software that meets the general requirements. They need it to meet their specific objectives as an organisation and their specific workflows. So for the BBC, it would be much more expensive to try and take something generic and personalise it than to just build the thing that they need to start with, you know, to build it specifically for them. Now, having said that, in the current times, it's even more of a challenge, because lots of people have software that was made to work in a very specific situation, and we're not now in that situation. So we had one of our clients, in fact, had a piece of software that could only be operated physically from their offices. So lockdown started, and they had employees going in at risk to their own health and at the risk to other people's health to use this piece of software, simply because they weren't able to access it elsewhere. So we worked with them to very quickly build a portal to go in front of the software so that they could then carry on doing their job from home. And that is another reason why having your own software can be very helpful, because if you need to make changes to it, it's easy to change something that you've built specifically. Whereas if it's a piece of software for loads and loads of different clients with loads and loads of different requirements, they might not want to change it to do what you do, and it's going to take them a long time to do it.
I've got a question. I'm going to give you one more question now for you, and then
okay.
I'm going to come to Kay's question. We'll unmute her.
Right.
This is a question back to the personal again. You're an extraordinary person, Zoe. you once said to me, I will be MD of Softwire, and you became, and I said, you'll never do that. And you became MD of Softwire. You,
actually say you'll never do that.
I did say that. And you know, won the World Backgammon Championship. You wanted to get involved in film, and you started getting involved in film. How do you, I think at the moment it's even more important than normal, how do you motivate yourself? What are your top tips? I remember the duck that you used to have to sit and you talk to on your desk, but what are your top tips for us who, you know, some days we wake up and we just do not want to be doing this?
So this is a really, really deep question, and I think it speaks to the heart of who we are as human beings. And I agree that right now, I personally am finding that there's something about lockdown that is making me a little bit closer to my own humanity and my own, I suppose even my own flaws in a way, might be a way of thinking about it, that I haven't got normal life to distract myself. And so I do have this, I have a Saturday with nothing booked and nothing to do. Maybe I'll work on my radio play. And then I find myself not working on my radio play. And then suddenly it's Monday and I have a job to do. And I think there are lots of different ways to do it and lots of different ways to deal with it. The overarching recommendation I would have is break everything down. There's a fantastic quote that says, as human beings, we overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 5 years. So, and that leads to this really common way of going about things, which is, let's take acting, for example. Oh, I want to get into acting. I want to be an actor. I've been to an acting class. Great. Am I in a film now? Oh, no. Oh, well, I'll go to another. Am I, you know, we want results short term, and we often consider that if we don't achieve something quickly and easily, that there's something wrong with us, or we're not doing the right thing, or maybe we should just give up and go and do something else. And actually, everything in life, and if you talk to anyone who has had real success in the world, they have worked at something over a very long period of time, like tens of years. It takes tens of years for people to write books and get them published, or build careers, or develop skills. It takes a long time. And that's not just a long time of deciding you want something and then waiting until it turns up. It's a long time of working on something every single day for that length of time. So particularly for writing, I've actually just set myself a new daily goal one of the things I've managed to do is a little bit off topic, but one of the things I've managed to do in lockdown is record a radio play that I wrote. And I'm trying to write the second series of this radio play, kind of the sequel. And I've just set myself a goal to write 500 words every day, or 1 page every day. And I find that that is such a great way of getting words down onto a page.
I think also it's very important when you're working at home and you, like, it can feel like the only thing you do is work, or cooking and cleaning and looking after the kids, that you have something that's creative, and that your brain gets to do something else, and it feels a little bit free every day.
Freedom is another really good point, because a lot of my advice is quite contradictory, I think. So there I've just said, look, schedule it. You want to achieve something, break it down into small steps and schedule it and do it every day. And that does achieve results, but I also am starting to learn it's perhaps a little bit counter to how the human spirit works. And as human beings, we don't really like to be told what to do. Even by ourselves, right? So there's something great in being able to do things when you want to do them, but also sometimes you need a bit of a push. So
well, I still use my to-do list that Pete Kenny, one of the directors, the founders of Softwire, told me to do, and I have a list of things I've got to do every day, And sometimes I look at them and think, I don't want to do that, but at least there's other things on the list that I might want to do instead.
Right.
And that keeps me being, and you cut it down so that every task you've got to do is only one line long, so that you can see how many things, and you put the meeting. So I mean, that's what I mean about the processes, and that's, this is an interesting way of selling Softwire, but you get stuff done at Softwire. You're good at helping people with their blocks, partly because you've got brilliant people, but also you've got these good processes, and it's difficult to, on a webinar, to express, but you guys can just do development. You know how to sort things out. I'm going to ask you one of the questions that Kay had. I'm going to
can I just elaborate on what you just said?
Yeah.
Because I do think that's really important, and I definitely also feel very well trained by Softwire in like how to get things done, and you know, how to make a list and how to pack lots of things into a day, which is a great skill. And I think that one of the things at Softwire that helps even more than that is thinking ahead around problems that might happen.
Paranoia.
Right. And again, as a human being, this is a double-edged sword, because while you can plan for things if you think of them in advance, you also don't want to be constantly worrying about things that haven't happened yet. But from the point of view of making a project happen, actually, if you know in advance what can go wrong, then you are so much, that's the only way you are ever going to be able to do something about it. So I just want to say that, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think so. It's really like, I plan things meticulously, and that's the training I got at Softwire. Okay, so Kay, I'm going to unmute you, and you had a question, so I'm going to let you speak to Zoe. Have you met Zoe before?
We know each other.
We know each other quite well. So, hi Zoe. My main question was about the fact that we are doing everything, and particularly me, on Zoom. So it's meetings, it's interviews. I mean, you know, I'm doing some work in the States on PR. Everything's on Zoom, including the gym classes and yoga classes. But there was a bit of a concern about the security of Zoom, and I just wondered if you could give me your perspective on that, because it does worry me that so much of what I'm doing now is suddenly, not face-to-face, is on this one platform that seems to be way ahead of the rest.
Right, so that's a really good thing to worry about. And actually, I think as humans, we have this kind of instinct for video cameras. And I think once you start using a webcam at all, you then become aware that that webcam is there even when you're not there. And I don't know if anyone else has seen, there was a really unfortunate video of a conference call where a poor woman went to the toilet without turning her camera off. But that's the kind of thing we all fear. And that's just from using a webcam at all, right? And we actually have to be able to trust the software, to trust that it is doing what it tells us it's doing and not doing anything beyond that. Now, the best way as a general layperson to deal with that is to always use the most popular tools that everyone else is using. So there really is safety in numbers here, because if a security vulnerability is uncovered, that will rapidly spread and people will stop using it. So Zoom is popular because it works. There are some downsides to it. So obviously we all joined the call today. And actually on this call, Justine chose whether to let you in or not, and chose to let you all in. On other calls, you can set it up so that doesn't happen. And then you run the risk that anyone who has that link can come into your meeting. And that's what there's been the most news about, because obviously they then have the ability to show anything to your group. And people have been using that in like quite distressing ways. So the thing with that is, once you're aware of it, as long as you're controlling, I mean, much in the way you would have physical security in a physical meeting room, right? You wouldn't want it set up so that anyone could just run in and like thrust a porn magazine at you, you know, like you kind of want your privacy ensured. Like having that set up on any platform like Zoom is a really good idea. Now, there are other things. So my personal take on any other issues with Zoom is that there are a lot of people who worry about really in-depth internet things that just don't affect day-to-day users. So there was a really long article about Zoom and all of its flaws. And the biggest problem they seemed to have was that it used tracking cookies on its website. Now, that's not necessarily ideal, but it's not a security hole. It's merely a way of using the internet that some people don't agree with. So in general, if you're using a piece of software that everyone else is using, you're safe. If you get asked to download something you haven't heard of and you don't know what it is, I would say do Google first and try and find a reputable news source or ask your friends what it is, what it does, and whether it's okay to use it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. What was the particular Zoom problem though when it first started? And I can remember seeing the founder sort of saying, "Oh, it's absolutely, coming on and saying it's absolutely fine, it's not a problem." What was the thing that sparked that whole debate?
My understanding is that it is this problem with people accessing Zoom calls that they weren't invited to.
Okay.
Okay.
So the gym classes, they don't have any of this accepting like Justine did, sort of gatekeeper to the call. So other people could just be easily hacking in if they happen to have the link. Is that right?
But who's vulnerable? Yes. Is it the place that's being hacked into, or is it all the users?
It's just so that no one can do anything to your computer through logging into the Zoom call. They can just, if they have permission, they could either come on naked, I think is a common thing that people like to do, or they can share their laptop and show you any image on their laptop. And the other security measure against this is, I think what has changed is that the links are now, and as Carolyn's just said, you can prevent all these things if you set up your call correctly. The links are now more complex, so they have more characters in them, so you can't just guess a random room in the same way. So that's the big change they've made that should make it better.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. So I'm going to mute Kay and I'm going to come to Penny Hilton now. Let's have a look if we can find Penny.
I'm here.
You're here. Hi, Penny.
Hello.
Hiya. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. So I had a situation where I'm doing some teaching online. I'm teaching MA students who are now dispersed around the world. And I wondered if you had any tips on how you can encourage creative collaboration virtually. I've used Miro a little bit. These students aren't using, they're really working on Zoom. And yesterday, for example, we were delivering some short workshops, and I was just very conscious that there they were in their lonely spaces staring into the Zoom camera, and whereas normally they'd be in a classroom situation and interacting. And I wondered, I've also used Fuse, where you have separate rooms to work in and you can oversee them. I'm sure you're aware of that software, but I've only ever used it once, and it's not something that's supported through the course that I'm teaching on. But I wondered if you had any sort of, other software advice, or more importantly, just small tips that might help unite some of these people who are very, very fragmented and having a very different learning experience than clearly they signed up for.
Yeah, sure. It's really, really great.
Good question.
Something else that supports, yes, Christopher just said it, Zoom also supports breakout rooms. I've not used it. I don't know if you've used it.
Okay. No, I haven't.
So you can break a big group into smaller groups. So the key is about, it is back to these non-verbal cues that we give each other, and the fact that sitting in a room with someone is not the same as being on a video call, even the same as being on a video call with them. So I think there's two challenges. One is building the bonds between people. I think that there's a lot that can be done around kind of tone setting questions. So firstly, curating who's in the room together. So, and I think it sounds like you're already thinking about this, right? So when is it appropriate for people to work on their own? When is it appropriate for the whole group to be together so that they can see what other people are doing and get that sense of community of everyone? And when is it appropriate for them to work in smaller groups? And how can you help them with that? So I think whenever there's a group, helping people encourage human bond creating questions. So let me try and think of an example. So I'm part of a CEO network, and they have this rule that at the start of every meeting you have an icebreaker question, which is always something personal. So something about you or how you like to work, or so you could say, what was the last big holiday you took? Mm-hmm. Example, and everyone goes around and just talks a little bit about that, or what's your favorite animal, something where everyone shares something, not something intrusive, but something personal and human about them, and that makes a big difference to how well the group works together. And that's exactly the kind of thing that, even if you're used to doing that in person, it's so easy to lose it when you go online, because it becomes a lot more transactional. We start to see our interactions as much more transactional. So I think that's really important. The other thing that you lose, which again is about using things like Miro, is the idea of I see what you see. Mm-hmm. So in a meeting room together, again, we can all see each other and we can see whatever we're looking at, or we can draw things together and we can all see what's being drawn. And it's going to depend on what people are comfortable with. So something we've done at Software is so coding is essentially, you can think of coding as being like creative writing or even like drawing. It's working on writing a piece of creative output. And what we've been doing is having people share their screen and code so that other people can watch them do it, and then ask questions about it, and then even record it so that you can then watch it back later if you can't make it. So is there something around either using software like Miro or screen sharing where they can draw something and everyone can see them drawing it, or sketch out diagrams and have people input in it that way? I think that's kind of the tips I've got.
No, that's really useful. Thank you very much. I like some of those ideas a lot, actually. I didn't know about Zoom Facility, but also the idea of getting people feeling really comfortable and interacting. Right. It's sort of trying to arrange a dialogue beyond just the sort of teacher-pupil things, getting them to work in smaller groups. Yeah, no, that's really useful. I'll look into those things. Thank you.
Something else we do actually on the psychological safety front is we have what's called a fist of five. And the idea is that at the start of every meeting, you say, how comfortable are you saying what you feel in this meeting? And the idea is you can do like 0, I suppose, is the lowest, up to 5, to say how free you feel you can be.
What did you call that, sorry?
We call it a fist of 5 just because it's...
Fist of 5, okay, yeah.
But it can also be more effective to write it down as well, because then people don't even have to reveal that it was them who said they didn't feel safe. And it's just a way of just double checking, particularly if you've got people who aren't contributing, mm-hmm. really sure why, like trying to find out whether people actually do really feel safe.
Yeah, yeah, because obviously in my situation, we have many students who whose English isn't their first language, so they're less confident in speaking in a group. Right. And also they're not interested in any sort of performance, and quite often if you're presenting your work, it's a design for social innovation, actually, the course, so it does take quite a bit of sort of discussion and conversation, and you know, some students are disadvantaged by that quite clearly. And that's interesting, thank you.
Yeah, good luck with it.
Nice question. I think it's really important. I was speaking to a friend last night who is a teacher, and she just said she's staring at these kids just who are not engaging at all. So I think you're not alone in having that problem.
Yeah.
I'm going to now come to Kristen. Chris, I always get your name wrong, don't I, Kristen? I'm really sorry. I love Kristen. Where are you on my thing? Okay, I'm going to put you into a video. So Kristen is in Berlin, and I don't think, Zoe, you've met before. We first met at the Groucho Club, but then we often meet in Bologna and places like that, and it's very sad not to do that this year. I like your jacket.
Thank you. I dressed up for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Justine, can I just say, did you change your view? Because I can't actually see Kristen on my screen right now.
Oh, I've pinned her. I don't know whether that, if you change your views, I'll unpin her video if that helps.
Or you can scroll through the pages.
If you change her to the next page, Zoe, then you'll be able to see her. She's on the second page.
Oh, and I'm called the Curved House.
The Curved House, sorry, that would also help.
So, sorry.
Oh, so maybe you were on the first page.
Can you find her now?
This is me.
Yes.
Yes.
Good, brilliant. Just so I can see as you ask your question rather than yeah.
I have a question that is not strictly related to this particular discussion, but it's related to software. I'm just wondering, what is generally the definition of software these days? And is there a difference between piece of software and an app? Because sometimes I think about things I'd like to do or create or collaborate on, and I'm not really sure where the line is with that anymore, and I'm just curious. Sorry if I'm hijacking the conversation, everybody.
You're very welcome to ask. So software is the broadest term. So in general, there is software and hardware. So hardware describes the tangible piece of technology. So a laptop is a piece of hardware, or a mobile phone is a piece of hardware. It's physically there, you can touch it.
Yeah.
And software is the part of the technology that you can't touch. It's the software that's running on the hardware. So, for example, Microsoft Windows is a piece of software. You can't pick up a Microsoft Windows, it just runs on your laptop.
So an app is a piece of software.
An app is a piece of software. Now, having said that, we get back to how people use different words. So if someone specifically means an app and wants to talk about an app, they're probably not likely to say software, they'll say an app. So sometimes in some context, if someone says software, maybe they're more likely to not be talking about an app. But in general, companies that, software again is a really broad term. So a software company can do all kinds of different things. Do you want to give me a bit more context in why you're asking and see if I can be more helpful?
Well, I mean, I have lots of ideas, but I work a lot in children's educational publishing. And sorry, my 2-year-old's just decided to talk to me now after an hour. And there's lots of things I'd love to do. I'd love to create a bit of software where they can make their own fonts using their own handwriting. And I'd love to create a bit of software where authors who are writing picture books can just write into a little template to work out how to structure their books, because especially with picture books, it's an important step. And these are things that I think would be pretty simple technologically. And I know that, since phones came along, we kind of automatically think of everything like an app. Can we do it? Can we make an app for that? Can we do that on our phone? And I'm just curious about, is there a world of apps and then a world of software, or is it all under one roof? And where do you begin deciding if something should be a piece web-based software or an app, or, generally thinking about it?
Yeah, great question. And this is kind of exactly the kind of thing we talk through at Softwire with all of our clients. So for the things that you're talking about, you can implement them in a lot of different ways. You've got a choice, basically. You can make it as a website where people go and open the website. And of course, they can do that in lots of different places. So you can have a functional website that does something, for example, creating a font, but you open on your mobile or on your iPad. You know, it doesn't have to be an app to run on your mobile, or you can choose to make it as an app, and then you have to choose which platforms and so on. So why don't you drop us a line after this, and we can chat through it in more detail? Yeah,
will do.
Good. You had another question that I was.
Oh,
go on. Ask the question.
More importantly, sorry, just wondering how exactly to win at backgammon, because I basically, this is a big thing in our house, and I lose every night. I lose. Just wondering if you've got any tips for someone who's really bad.
Well, the biggest tip is to roll really good dice.
Oh, what are the chances?
Maybe if you practice rolling, you're not rolling enough sixes. Maybe if you do a bit.
I need an app for that.
Right.
Do we have thank you, Kirsten? It's lovely to see you. It's so nice to have you in the.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
All the way from
Berlin. It's so good. I'm going to now see if there are any other questions. Do we have any other questions? Okay.
I haven't been watching the chat either. I see it when they pop up, but I haven't got the whole.
Has everybody found this useful today and interesting? Yeah, we're all nodding. That's good. That's good. Again, Helen has put a note. Oh, thank you. I got a wave from Joe. Helen has put a note in the chat for you to get in touch with her if you're interested in doing some software development with them. And I think I wanted to also thank Chris and some of the others for giving us those tips on Zoom. Chris, Heather and Renee, that's really useful. We're thinking of using Zoom chat rooms for our next agent tables. So, and we'll need to do breakouts for that. So it's great having them. Yeah, Helen's just put that in there now. So her contact details.
Justine, have I got time to just answer Kay's question on podcasts?
Oh yes, I didn't see that question. Yes, of course.
Just because I wanted to add something that obviously to listen to podcasts, then there's the Apple Podcast app. Lots of people use, and SoundCloud. I think you can also get podcasts on Spotify now, or is that just audiobooks? Yeah, on Spotify. However, I did have a piece of software that I really wanted to recommend for recording podcasts. So we do a podcast at Softwire, and we've been using a piece of software called Zencastr, which is really clever because you can talk to each other like you're on a Skype call. So some people do podcasts just by you talk on Skype and you record the Skype call. But that means that every time someone has a problem with their internet, it's reflected in the call. Whereas Zencastr, you talk online, but it records everyone's audio on their own machine. And so then it can combine all those files together at the end. So yeah, it's not quite an answer to your question, Kay, but that's just such a neat piece of software. I wanted to share it.
Cool, thank you. I'm gonna say thank you, Zoe. You've been absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Softwire, for sponsoring today and being involved in this webinar. I'm going to unmute everybody now in case anybody wants to say anything or just wave or just maybe we'll just clap Zoe.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zoe.
And
Justine, thank you.
Good,
it's not like a round of applause that you normally get in real life. That's a bit. It's a little bit.
Virtually is good.
Sorry.
It's virtually is good.
Virtually it's good. So a big hug to everyone, a big virtual hug for everyone. I know some of you are probably at home alone, and for an hour we felt like we haven't been alone, and God bless technology. And the people,
on this occasion, yeah.
and the people that bring it to us, because you know, I don't know what this world would be like if we hadn't been able to communicate, and
yeah, imagine.
So thanks so much. Hazel's doing a little clap there at the bottom. Thank you. I'm going to stop recording now.